Hi everyone, it's Jerry. Let's have a look at a game from the Aimchess US Rapid 2021. On the white end, Levon Aronian, and he's paired against Magnus Carlsen. I was initially drawn to this game because of one of Carlsen's post-game interviews from the event, where he described this game as, I'm paraphrasing now, but he said it came quite naturally to him. I wanted to see what he meant by that. And I think this game does a good job in illustrating two key ideas, one by each side. Pay attention to the tempi each side invests in the middle game and the positive that results from each. In the end, we'll see why one of the positives turns out to be the greater. So opening-wise, we have a Ruy Lopez. This one ends up being a closed system. The D pawns are the ones that will ultimately decide whether it turns, whether it's opened or closed. Going just a single step, we have closed a board. The time controls, by the way, for this game are 15 minutes each side with a 10-second increment. You gain 10 when you make a move. And that right there, by the way, if you're looking to improve your own game, that gets my vote for one of the very best time controls to work with in practicing. It's kind of that Goldilocks zone, not too fast, not too slow. So, what's the first moment to speak of? I guess this one right here. White's ready to chop away on b5. The rook's unprotected. Black wants to be able to maintain the pawn on b5. So, some defense of the rook is necessary. Bishop b7, simple development. d3, rook to e8, and this move 10, bishop d2, this moment here is really the one that I spent the most time on, I guess, in preparing for this video. I had some questions I needed to answer for myself, so I'd like to share some stuff here. For one, with this last move, f7 is a bit more sensitive. How are we reacting as black if white goes for this caveman-like idea? Quick assault against the weakest square in black's camp. What are we doing here? Of course, playing as black, we can repeat. We can go back to defend, undo our last move, and say that this knight has really no better than to return back into the ball game and could have a repetition of position. But do we really want to be locked into that as black? You don't have to do that. So if this move is played, you can play d5. However, proceed with caution if you're playing as black here, because after d5 and a capture, it's important not to recapture straight away. The best move here is knight d4, striking at the bishop, and only a little bit later do we go ahead and take away, in some way, on d5. What's the issue? If you go ahead and take like this, well, black would find himself in some fried liver-like variation. There would be this sacrifice on f7, followed up with queen to f3. And in order to preserve this knight, the king has to march forward. I don't want any part of this position playing as black. Okay, just a word of caution in case there's this quick attack against f7. In the game, we have bishop to d2, so I'm not used to seeing that move. I'm used to seeing the knight make use of that d2 square within this type of structure. It's very often a nice pivot, knight d2, knight f1, where it eyes up g3 and e5. I guess really the main aim is to eye up the f5 square with the queen knight. So I wondered a bit about that move. It is, in my estimation, a half-developing move. That's how I see it, a bit of a half-developing move, as well as, I think, maybe kind of waiting a little bit to see what black's next move will be. What decision, for example, might black take with the d-pawn? Is it going to go 1 or 2 steps? Also, note that because there is this tension, this tension right here, these two guys, this is a candidate move, going to the edge with the knight, increasing pressure on b5. So for example, if black followed with d6 on this move 10, knight a3 is one of the better moves. And it's difficult to maintain the pawn on b5, or at least very awkward if you're going to maintain the pawn on b5. And if it budges, let's say with a push, this knight now, or white has achieved something. He has gained access to an important square, c4. So, after bishop to d2, what do we have? Well, Carlsen makes a decision with the b pawn, eliminates the queen knight's only two options, and so there's only going to be one way to develop the knight. It's to d2. Bishop has to move. g5 it is. Knight a5. Two ideas here. Hunting the bishop, potentially, and a clearance for the c-pawn to contribute. Bishop backs up. There's no time here to win the pawn because of this variation. Black gets the pawn back with this trick. Pawn takes knight, queen takes knight. This is not looking too great here for Team White. Okay. Bishop e2 it is. Flight square. Notice the decision here on this move 13. The bishop backs up, doesn't give up the bishop for knight exchange. d6. Now this is secure directly. Knight to d2. Where else? c5. And now on this move 15, bishop takes knight. That bishop had that option just a couple of moves ago. Why is now the moment to take on f6? Why is white going for this? What has changed? What has changed is the d5 square. What am I talking about? After h6, if you capture here, d5 is not a hole. A couple moves later, only after c5, the d5 square is a hole. Now white goes for this capture. Why? Well, now this is a square that white has in mind. He's going to pivot about with his minor pieces, where eventually a minor piece will be there and will be able to stay there, right? There's only, this bishop isn't going to be able to ever control the d5 square. These knights will jump around and eventually one will arrive on d5. The bishop's already there. So we have this battle of ideas now that surfaces. It is only at this point right here when black has created a hole on d5, a potential outpost for one of the white minor pieces, does white go ahead and give up the bishop pair. And the number of tempi each side invests now is going to achieve something. For white, white's going to get something on d5. For black, what is black going to get? Let's see. So first we have knight c4, some exchanges, a5. This is really a game of inches. Black doesn't want to see, this pawn even step foot on his side of the board. So first things first, a5 it is. Flight square for black, or for white. g6, these are all pretty standard, small, improving type of moves. After h4, h5, same story. You don't want to see this pawn get to h5. It can be quite disruptive to the king side. So now the knight is maneuvering. So too is the dark square bishop to the only open diagonal. Queen f3. There's a threat now against f7. How do we defend that? Well, it's rook to f8. And after knight to e3, rook to a7. So this one right here, I thought was pretty cool. Black recognizes, it has probably recognized for some time now that, yeah, there's going to be a knight on the d5 square. And that is usually, I mean, there's plenty of example games out there. Strong knight on d5. Well, white's going to get that, but black's going to try and show that there's something more important in the position that he's gearing up for, and there it is, the break. We have yet to have a single pawn exchange. What does this mean? No rooks are really contributing until there's a pawn break. And while white was investing all of these tempi into getting a minor piece, an unassailable minor piece on that d5 square, black is positioning himself to get the initial pawn break in, which will open up activity for both rooks and extend the scope for his bishop pair. That turns out to be the big difference in this one. It's not just about extending the scope of the bishop pair, but we're getting in this pawn break and opening up activity for the rooks. King on g7, out of the way of the bishop. It's soon going to be, just staring off into space. It cuts into black's position, but it's easily worked around. Notice also the rook position on a7. The bishop is ready to move, and the rook will cover conveniently a couple of the forward squares by the knight. This is kind of what we have when two great players are going against one another. Something I found in improving my own game is, when you observe the play of two great players, rarely is it going to be super one-sided. And what I mean by that is, one side just has all positives and there's no positives to speak for the other side. No, there's clearly something positive in this position for white, that strong square, that piece on d5, but this other positive, this pawn break eventually that we see with f5 and the rooks gaining great activity, yeah, that turns out to be the bigger positive. So, some more reorganizing. f5 is in. We recapture with the rook. And bishop to c6. Clearing the way for the rook. Some pressure on a4. I guess in some lines maybe you could be grabbing a pawn. But yeah, we're controlling this knight. That's the main thing that sticks out to me with the bishop c6 move. Rook on a to e1. And queen to a8. And I think it's moves sort of like this that kind of have Carlsen describing the game as flowing quite natural to him. Right? Everything is turning out to be quite harmonious, pretty logical here, right? What is white's best piece? That guy on d5? Well, it's usually not a good idea to allow that piece to sit in my house. How can I challenge it? Well, queen to a8 is the way to do it, and maybe the only way to do it. I don't think you want to really strike at the knight from the other angle, right? Setting up yourself up for discoveries. But yeah, queen, corner pocket, that knight has to go. If you're going to defend it, you're in a pickle. You're in a pin. Okay. The knight has to go. Knight to e3 it is. And now there's this big square on f3. Right away, it's made use of. These bishops, I could have pointed it out right here. In fact, after we had this first pawn exchange, these bishops are really raking the whole board, cutting into the white side. Very nice. And right here after that, bishop f3, queen d2, bishops functioning on adjacent diagonals. Brutal. You'll notice that black doesn't care about knight takes rook. It is hitting with check, Let's see, after queen here, black plays d5, doesn't care about this move because queen is dead. Or you'd have to put the rook in the way because these two bishops are controlling all these squares. Queen has nowhere to go. So what do we have? After d5, eventually that knight is going to be attacked. Attack pin pieces. Bishop backs up. If bishop takes pawn here, yeah, that's nothing. We just take. Knight is pinned. So he backs off. He backs up with the rook right now. There's actually this is one of those points where you could kind of torture white a little bit. Just there's no rush. This knight still can't move, and the queen, yeah, the knight is in a pin, and the knight can't get out of the pin. The queen can't get out of the pin in one move. Right? There's only one safe square for the queen, but you're still in a pin. So just calmly retreating, rook to f8, and now d5 hits. The end result of this, what do we have? Black is now going to win some material in the conversion. There's nothing really exciting happening there. So let's just see these the finishing touches, keeping it squeaky clean. Yeah, Stark square bishop gets on the main diagonal now. We can take on d4 with check. There is no issue here if queen takes bishop because we would have this in-between move, capturing first the rook, and only then taking the queen. We're up a rook here. So, final moves, rooks are off. And after the queen exchange, white resigns at this moment. Nothing to do here. Offering queen exchange, ready to take the pawn, the other pawn. Nothing to play for. There's one check. If that happened, if the game did continue from here, check here, no follow-up checks, and yeah, it's probably looking like checkmate soon for the white king. But this is as far as it got after queen to f5. Aronian threw in the towel. And yeah, I found this one instructive, seeing those two ideas in action. The idea to activate the rooks when there wasn't a single pawn exchange, that was the bigger, that was the more important idea in this one. Anyhow, as usual, feel free to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.